Part 1.
The monitors flickered, replaying the incident for Bort. The tape began again, the waste disposal pod opening, the alien erupting from it, the blazing gunfire. This is what had brought his squad here to Todd Lab LXI. Stop. Rewind. He could not help it. The incident stirred the memories. Bort closed his eyes and replayed his own internal tape. Even now, it mesmerized him. A quivering under the furrowed translucence of the object, 4 rippling lips, blossoming, inviting, a wet shimmer of veined and coiled life hidden within. The eruption, the shriek, the cold, suffocating dampness over his head. The violation, pulsing into his mouth and throat, his choking spasms only forcing the obscene spiraling further down into his vitals. Then nothing. Nothing until he awakened to a dim, red agony. He opened his eyes, thick with crust, lids barely responding. A circle of faces, masked, hovering above blue gowns tinged with dewdrops of red. He was bucking, rasping, throwing his head forward to glimpse his belly as it distended impossibly. A tear in the skin splashed open. A mottled azure mass leaped from the scarlet fount. He felt his legs numb as his spine twisted. The doctors were on it in a second, a lethal metallic device plunging into the mass. A spray of citrine pus, burning, steaming. Bort opened his eyes and let the monitor display rivet his attention anew. Here were sharp lines and clean readout. The schematically perfect abstractions of the state-of-the-art medical station, Todd Lab LXI. Scanned and analysed as he orbited its equator, even now. Orderly, inorganic reality was all he need attend to now. What was past, save for the loss. The legs he no longer had, or could truly feel, tingled for a moment, just long enough for him to miss them. Then they were gone, as they would always be. The pang was too familiar and hardly worth a flinch. Bort's eyes returned to the monitor as it replayed the opening of the lethal Todd Lab LXI medical waste disposal pod. The pod had been methodically taken aboard, its hospital identification symbol recorded, the military staff ready to cope with whatever lay within. All a matter of routine. Hundreds had been impounded, recorded, and opened with clockwork precision by the corporate-funded Waste Retrieval and Research Subdivision, dedicated to the systematic seizure and inspection of unregulated medical waste disposal. It was a nasty job under the best of conditions, opening the hermetically sealed canisters of medical waste and inspecting the contents. Some of the waste pods were larger than a one-man vehicle, most of them much smaller. All of them took time to inspect. It was a tedious, unpleasant routine. Most were uneventfully brimming with bagged and labelled tissues, organs and limbs. A cold soup of discarded human fragments peppered with glistening shards and strands of disposable medical technologies. Though the vacuum of airless space ensured their preservation, the pockets of tainted air and random cultures of infectious bacteria always made combing the wastes interesting. There was an urgency to the operation that belied its routine. And there, in the 744th unit, a discoloured pod from a medium-sized medical installation, designated as Todd Lab LXI, the caution proved justified. Bort savoured it again, the inevitable keying of the senses as the pod was unsealed. At that second of disinterment, all eyes and instruments were tuned, all hands at the ready, all weapons brought to bear on the suspect vessel. Then came the movement from inside, the talons, tail and teeth erupting, the blaze of pulse fire as the alien spilled out of the pod. Bort looked up from the monitors to gaze out at the command module's viewport. He tried to lose himself in the expanse of space, but there was no awe in it for him. Only space, dead air. If men had ventured into space to move nearer to God, they had failed. The void consecrated the emptiness of Bort's existence. The only gods men seemed to still worship in this vacuum were aliens like that in the waste pod. Offal-eating blasphemies to be scoured and hunted down like vermin. The hunt, and his omniscient role as overseer, slaked his thirst for bringing the alien hostiles a measure of the torment they had given him. Every raid would arouse him, though he was impotent. Each explosion sent a shudder of pleasure up his shattered spine. Every hive purged made his truncated flesh less of a prison. Bort turned the command module about to face the dark side of Todd Lab LXI. His eyes followed Tunnel Rat's progress as she moved over the Todd Lab, its surface bristling with spires and antennae, punctuated by sealed exits and entrances. Bort stabbed at the keyboard before him and brought Rat into clear magnified view on the primary monitor screen. She cradled the implosion unit gingerly, weaving weightlessly like a trout between the obstacles in her path. The unit was the last of 4, the other 3 already positioned and locked into place on Todd Lab's exterior. Together, the 4 units were the mission's fail-safe device, its sensors alert to the presence of the alien hostiles. Once programmed and set to work, nothing could stop it as long as alien hostiles remained in range. If any were detected leaving the station, the device would automatically trigger its own countdown and detonation, an all-engulfing implosion. If they failed, they would still succeed. The implosion would exert its inexorable force, pulling any and all objects into its wake, inward, collapsing forever inward, until it was spent. The alien spore would not spread from Todd Lab LXI. They were hardly gods, they were a scourge, and Bort the exterminator. As Rat cleared a battered airlock entrance iris, metal upon metal folded into a circular pattern, Bort broke the silence. "Command mod. Bort. Freeze it there, Rat." He spoke into his throat microphone. As always, she refused to reply. She simply acted. "It's the prime ventilation shaft just ahead of you," Bort continued. "Those airlock pressure doors. Lock that ticker in place to detonate it into the shaft. Then climb back aboard." Again, she acted. She never spoke to him. Once she had. Once. Before. Rat moved with customary assurance and grace. Bort envied that most of all about her. Even in her absurd tunnel gear, she moved like a cat. And now, in zero gravity, hugging a baby boomer, the implosion charge, 3.5 feet of griddled steel, she carried herself with uncanny skill. It made him ache to watch her. If things had been different, he might have been skirting the abyss with her now. He had been a handsome cadet, once, when he enjoyed the nickname Sparky instead of Bort. At that time she did give him the time of day. Perhaps Rat had loved him once even. He could have been with her today, known her intimately, shared the insular grunt talk, privates aside, and afterwards she rolled over, her back to him, forever to him. The scars were too deep, and the touch of a man could only echo her father's touch. Her father, the dead man who climbed into bed with them every time they tentatively made love. A dull knot flared in his throat as his eyes kissed the next monitor. Bort gazed at his own image, and as ever, he loathed it. Face immobile, scarred and partially paralyzed. His body was a calloused tube stake squeezed into an armored mobile unit of life support systems. Stomach, kidneys, intestines of plastic, and wire whirring and gurgling like clockwork. Its chrome surface was broken only by the extension of his right arm. He was no longer a man. The vermin seed had twisted his flesh and seared his spirit. No man could be his friend, no woman his lover ever again. Bort applied pressure with his right arm, and his console responded. 8 screens flickered new imagery, faces, figures. His eyes flicked away from his own hateful visage, shifting his attentions back to Rat. The baby boomer was in place, programming console open. her gloved hands punching in the sequential coding, moments from synchronization of the detonator timer. He looked to another monitor, where a dark-eyed man, half his head shorn of skin or hair and gleaming with scrimshaw circuitry, tipped into view. His gaze met Bort's, and without pause he spoke. "This room won't suffice, Commander," the voice complained. "They say it's the only area under security at this time, and Dr. Kotlow is still refusing to cooperate. No one here seems to know where he is." "This idea of corporate high security, it's all bullshit, Ears," Bort whispered. "They're all bureaucrats, all ineffectual. They don't know what they're doing." Ears' static obscured face in the upper left monitor, his voice in Bort's ear. "Affirmative, sir." "They know why we're here, yo?" "They do," Bort rasped. "I told you, Ears. They don't know what they're doing. How the hell are they going to know what we're doing? You take what you need and pronto. I want that communication link in place by 1500 hours and link with point established." The facial circuitry twinkled. "Yo, that's an affirmative." "Point, report." Point's monitor showed a communication beacon, made in Ear's image, set akimbo on a hospital corridor floor. Point's hands came into view and set the simulacrum upright, and an impertinent tap of his boot sent its circuitry alight. "Point, report." "Todd Lab, Sector 7, Corridor 16A. Beacon set. And that makes 15. All units responsive, all plugged into the security surveillance systems within the station. You can monitor every corridor, ears or no ears. You'll be in contact with all squad members save the rat at all times. Check?" "That's a checkpoint. Proceed to position once rat's back inside." Bort's eyes shifted to the exterior monitor as Rat was coming in, the metallic iris dilating shut behind her. The screen blinked, switching to an interior view. Rat was inside the airlock, already stripping off her airtight suit, her strangely proportioned battle gear visible in the open locker next to her. Bort braced himself and paused. His eyes lingered, her back to him. Rat geared up quickly, efficiently. With the final piece of equipment in place, she shifted her weight and moved towards the open floor-level ventilation shaft as Point's shadow moved across her. Now she looked ungainly, her equipment sculpted around her lower back and hips in an insane parody of the female figure. The gear was sleek and compact, but its positioning looked uncomfortable. Standing was clearly an effort. As she tipped forward to adjust her knee padding, the gear slid back into advancement position. Suddenly, she held the figure of a wasp, poised to fly, venom within. Her flamethrower nestled against her shoulder with easy familiarity. Despite the high-technology gear, Rat's surveillance system was next to useless. Once she entered the tunnels, visibility in the darkness and signal penetration were dubious at best. She preferred it that way. He knew. The dead man between them. Point stepped into view beside her, grinning. "Tunnel rat is in position, chastity belt in place. Keeps the hostiles' pointy peckerheads at bay." Bort winced. Point didn't know. Couldn't know. "Okay, Rat, move out and station yourself at the junction of airlocks. 449er and 449er H. Await leader's command." She didn't reply. She'd never reply. Rat's body cocked into position, the clumsiness suddenly gone. As she arched down and into the tunnel, the design of her equipment became apparent. Streamlined for maximum mobility in crouching and crawling positions, leaving the arms and legs unencumbered. She was supple and lithe, slithering effortlessly into the conduit, a hornet invading an enemy hive. And she was gone. "Point, get yourself into position. Your current sector, Corridor 22C, 1 click away." "Affirmative. Jiminy, you in?" Point asked. Ears responded promptly, I'm in, Point. Go, man, go. Keep my conscience clean, Jiminy, Point whispered. Point's monitor blurred with renewed movement as he hustled off to take the high ground. Point's face rarely appeared on Bort's screens. He and Rat were the only two specialists who relied strictly on the POV, point of view, monitoring system. State-of-the-art surveillance equipment affording maximum visibility laced their armor and uniforms. Microfilament video and audio sensors threading them with an external nervous system that ears and Bort were tuned into at every second. Where Rat's monitors were barely adequate, Point's were of the highest resolution. He was the squadron's eyes, and aside from the tunnels, wherever they had to go, he went first. If Point didn't see it, it didn't matter. If he did, and it was alive, it was dead by the time the next in line reached his position. Point was the man. Leader, all mobile units in position. Kicker in chains. Bort squinted to focus on the monitor as Leader's features coalesced into view. Give us a minute, Leader barked, his bony features tense and already beaded with sweat. Still adjusting his sedative dosage. We don't want him waking up until we're good and ready for him. Settle down, Bort fired back. You've got minimum 5 minutes, and still no sign of Richards. You'll have all the action you want, soon enough. We're a fucking kamikaze unit, Leader growled, and still no token Jap. Let me know when that chicken shit Richards shows.